Aloha and welcome to Capital Connection with your host, Senator Angus McKelvey. I'm your moderator, Tom Blackburn Rodriguez. Our guest today is Shawn Basaillion, who is a master restorer with experience in post-fire cleaning from the Marshall Fire in Colorado. He will join us later in the program to talk about restoring Lahaina after the wildfire. And now your host of Capital Connection, Senator Angus McKelvey.
Aloha, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thank you, Tom, again, for being our moderator. And welcome, everybody.
And welcome to you, Senator. How are you this morning? Have you had your coffee yet?
No, I've not. but shortly thereafter. But we're excited about getting on with the show, and hope everybody's having a good morning and still hunkering down. Hopefully the wind will back off today a little bit.
Well, yesterday that wind was really something, and I'll tell you, that's not a good idea. It just seems that every time the wind comes up, we get another wildfire, we get another fire. And we had fires Monday off of the Veterans Highway, and then we had Tuesday, we had a fire in North Kihei that required the evacuation of one of the condo buildings. People had to go over to the community center. So I think that when the wind comes up, we should watch out for fires. They call them red flag days.
Actually, yeah, this is slightly different. Red flag days are when there's no humidity in the air.
Yeah.
And the winds are really strong, so it actually dries everything up. So any kind of a spark. And what we just had was good old-fashioned nuclear trades, is their nickname. But the same thing, though. They're still billowing with huge force, and any kind of a fire, even with the rain it was bringing in, could spread quickly. And
I think,
fast.
Senator, that kind of demonstrates that the danger of fire is not just up country or, unfortunately what happened in Lahaina, but we have to be aware of this all throughout the island, particularly, now with climate change and extended drought periods. We have to get really serious about, getting ourselves ready for fire-resistant buildings, codes, and that kind of thing. Because this is not going to go away.
Drive through Haiku right now, and places are normally tropical, lush, wet,
right.
And they're just dry to the bone with the leaves curling on the trees and everything. So places that you think, maybe there's not much of a fire risk. Fire risk is everywhere.
Yeah, it certainly is.
It can quickly spread, quickly jump from one area to another, especially in the Central Valley there.
Interestingly enough, I was glancing through the report that was put out by the House working group on the fires. One of the things they pointed out is most of our fires are caused by human activity. Relatively few by lightning or what have you. So I guess we're just going to have to buckle up and really pay more attention to what we're doing. But we got caught in that Veterans Fire. They closed the highway there, and it was a 3-hour ride back home from Central Maui to Kihei. It was really jammed up. So, but there were no casualties. That was really great. And again, hats off to the Maui Fire Department, which you and I both believe is understaffed and underfunded in order to take care of these things. So they did a great job. They did a great job on that.
Yes, one of my things has been the need for extra equipment, including these things called striker engines, which we've talked about before. And so I think it would have, from what I understand, it would have made a potential world of difference. And if there's a way to secure that next year somehow, working with the county, it would be obviously a wise investment because we're not just a rural area anymore.
Right.
We have this rural-urban interface, which, is the reason why Lahaina was so devastating. And you need, obviously, the kind of equipment to fight these kinds of urban conflagrations.
Well, I know that you were at the Veterans Day celebration up in Makua. How was that?
It was very good. It was a very touching ceremony. Helped to present the flowers at the memorial for the missing POW MIAs, Vietnam veterans, and there was others there, and a rainbow came out in the middle of it. It was quite nice. And then afterwards, the veterans went down to Kalama Park and had an amazing Veterans Day picnic down there with a classic car show and a band and a very colorful colorful harmonica player from Texas, recounting his Vietnam stories for everybody. But it was really neat. Everybody was out having a good time, so it was awesome to see, people coming by and thanking the veterans for their service, which, I and my family personally thank them for everything that they've done.
Well, I was at Kalama Park there, and I have to tell you, there was a great 1938 coupe that was incredible. I had some really great cars there. And of course, Senator, whenever there's a community event, I look for the hot dogs. And
Gee, that's a shocker.
it was a stunner, and they had great hot dogs and mac salad. So I had lunch, and the music, you're right, was fantastic. These guys were on the harmonica and the drummer, and they reminded me of the band from the Muppets show. The wild guys that were playing, but they were totally into it. Everyone had a great time. There were kids everywhere, and it's a kind of celebration that we should have, and I think we should remember sometimes, Senator, that people sacrifice their lives so that we could enjoy a day like that at peace. It was a very peaceful day. We had a really
yes,
nice
it was.
time.
It was very nice. It was good. It was good to see everybody out there again, enjoying the event.
Something is happening that caught my eye, and I know you've been involved in this, is the fish-in protest that's happening up in Lahaina about the housing issues. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it was. The fishing was held by community leaders and others who are very upset about the term for affordable housing, long-term housing, and even some kinds of housing, dignified housing for an intermediary solution. Obviously, we've been very gracious to have our partners with the hotels who've been accommodating the victims, but as we've talked about, it's not a good fit for families living in a hotel. There's a very small slice of the population that would serve as that intermediary kind of housing, but for most families, it's very difficult. And so this need for housing, and also there as well, they reiterated the call for mortgage relief and rent, and they're trying to get a hold of the rental market as well, which is gotten obviously very compressed and the rates have skyrocketed, and with construction workers potentially coming in, it's going to go so even more. So the community came together to send a message out to everybody that just because a deadline's been met doesn't mean that things are moving forward substantially. And so they're there to keep driving home the point that we need these things, and we need, if nothing else, a game plan. A game plan is communicated to the community, in which they, at the end, feel like it was their input that was the final decision, not the other way around.
One of the things that I've read that they were raising a concern about, Senator, was the number of short-term rentals in Lahaina that have taken long-term rentals off the market. And they talked about the Minatoya legal opinion that if you had built before 1989, or how you were using the property before then, that you could do short-term rental. And their position was these short-term rentals have taken off the market a lot of the housing that used to be there for the workers. Is that are you familiar with that?
Oh, yes, very much so. Who isn't? I mean, Maui, the short-term rental situation has put a compressed Maui's long-term rental market for years. But now with the fire, now with the loss of all of the rentals, and homes in Lahaina, and now again with visitors coming back who are using these short-term rentals, you now have all these units being locked up that could potentially be used for, fire victim housing, to provide some kind of long-term, or intermediary solution at least, until homes can be rebuilt and more, housing and rentals can be brought online. However, until then, you need to go ahead and continue to limit short-term rentals. And it's draconian, but we're in a disaster-declarated area.
Right.
And
right.
in that area, certain laws and things are suspended for the greater good. And this is one where the greater good clearly is that for right now, short-term rentals, especially in West Maui, hurt the situation. And hopefully people can see that by working with the community and providing housing to the fire victims and being a partner in long term, they're setting the stage for potentially being able to move back into that activity down the road. But as long as things are unstabilized and there's no housing, that'll never happen. And so the call by everyone in the community is a call that's been going on for a while, but it needs to, obviously now it's hit a whole new level. As the protesters said, they're grateful for, the Red Cross and the hotels, for what they're doing, but everybody recognizes it's not a good fit for family.
And I think everyone should realize that this is a peaceful, respectful protest. This is not, people blocking highways.
Very much so. Very much so. Lahaina Strong worked well to ensure that, and the people who spoke were very eloquent but pointed in what they're saying. But it's not something. It's something that I've been saying since the week after the fire. Project Thanksgiving, I nicknamed it. Well, that deadline's about to come and go,
right.
And so it makes the protest even more poignant, because had that been taken seriously by the powers that be, then we would have had a targeted date months ago that we would have been working on, trying to at least get families into these situations. But now it's upon us, and a lot of families, while grateful to have a place for this holiday, it would have been nice if they could have been able to do something in their own kitchen with their own meal and their own friends, and being able to root for their own football teams.
Yeah, it's really tough to recover when you're in a situation that's temporary. I understand sometimes people in a hotel, they're glad to be there, but sometimes they have to move from room to room. They don't even stay in the same room, so it's very disruptive.
Well, exactly, and for, like I said, there is a sliver of the population that can, either live in a condo or an apartment, or they work with the visitors, or they're single, and the situation is more tenable. But really, for families, especially when you have like twin beds with two children and a couple, and you lose the ability to cook their own meals and do all these things that families do for regularity. And continuity and regularity is so key for healing and recovering and moving forward, establishing some kind of, and it's very hard in that situation. I think that's what is the underlying message. It's not one of hey, we're not appreciative of the help we've gotten, but this is not a solution that can roll on and on and on.
Right. Senator, we do have on the line, Shawn is on the line from calling in from Colorado. Shawn, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Shawn, help us out.
Hey, aloha, Shawn. Thank you so much for
How do I
us.
pronounce your last name, Shawn?
It's Basaillion. It's French. Not
Basaillion.
that I am, but it is.
Basaillion. Okay. Well, Shawn Basaillion is on the line, Senator, and we're going to talk about the Marshall Fire and his background. So I'm going to step back and let the two of you have a conversation.
Oh, aloha. Shawn, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you coming on the air and talking story with us, as we say out here, to share your perspectives from the fire out there. Just for our background, Mr. Jonathan Powers, who works also in the adjustment and response area, introduced me to Shawn. And he said, the fire you guys should be looking at more so than the fires in California is a fire called the Marshall Fire out in Colorado, which bears much more striking similarities to what you guys have experienced, and possibly offers a peer in the future of what Lahaina may experience going forward. So, in your background, Shawn, and working generally, can you just give us just an overlay, a 30,000-foot view of your work has been professionally, and then what your involvement was in the Marshall Fire?
Well, thank you. Yeah. So I am a resident of Louisville, Colorado, where the Marshall Fire probably impacted the most, which is nowhere near a demographic environment that's anywhere comparable to an island life type environment or seaside environment where this sort of fire can happen. But we did have a lot of structures go and a lot of families displaced. And so I live in that community. I'm also a national restoration professional instructor that deals with restoration contractors on a national level, mostly in the U.S., and certainly within Colorado have dealt with a lot of other fires and a lot of other situations, including the troublesome fire and things that happened in Grand Lake, which is a lot of similarities, I would say, to the island fires. and resort communities, and the challenges that we face in becoming whole again, so the community can thrive and be what it is or was. But so I work as an instructor, trainer. I have a cleaning and restoration service business that does cleanup for smoke and fire and contamination and cleaning of all sorts of forensic levels, from hospital level cleans to to residential homes, which we had thousands and thousands of smoke damaged, impacted homes around the thousand structures that burned in Louisville during the Marshall fires, the last of the year in 21. And then I survived and lived in that community and continue to operate a business there, and have watched the recovery, been involved with the community leaders to see its regrowth, its cleanup, planned support that was around it. It's been incredible. Really the ability to survive and move as fast as we did came because we have so many capable resources around a very affluent community that has homes that were insured. Similar structures that were built in a similar period of time that could be rebuilt or put in with resources around it, and the ability to lodge people within an hour or so if needed, as families were displaced. But anyway, I'm a restoration professional. I deal with this with large catastrophe teams.
So it seems like there are a lot of similarities between the two. I mean, they started off in the I guess the brush fire, and then turned into an urban fire, and then you had the loss of all of the housing. But you said there was another fire that bore even more of a striking resemblance to Lahaina.
Yeah, Grand County, East Troublesome is what it was. It came in through Rocky Mountain National Park in the end of 2020. And that fire evacuated the entire town. It damaged a lot of remote structures, cabins, unusual builds, resort homes that were built into the mountains, just families' homes that were not necessarily year-round. Some were, many weren't. And so as those become holiday rental property, short-term rentals, those sorts of things for seasonal use between recreational needs of winter and summer, this happened, basically in September, October-ish of 2020, and then we went into the winter with families displaced and people nowhere to stay. And I worked within the community immediately as a restoration professional, and that's my backyard. It's where I go and recreate for all sorts of fishing and great activities. It's I immediately responded to that community and worked with the local mayor, the local restoration contractors, the community to give local advice on how to clean up yourself, how to self-remediate, what remediation means, what the companies that are going to start swarming around them are going to be looking to help them with, to understand their insurance if they have it for smoke damage and contamination movement and all the things that are going to be around that came from the fire, not necessarily the fire damage was a big part of it. I work with the IICRC as a professional fire restoration master restorer, and I work with several committees.
I'm sorry, the IICRC stands for?
That is the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification. It's the kind of embodiment. They hold the standard, or currently have written the most current standard of restoration work for the fire and smoke damaged structures in the world, and that's the S700. It's a guideline, a process of how you should procedurally go through to manage a fire and smoke loss environment, how to clean it up properly, what to do, the steps to take, the equipment to use. And there's professional training on that standard to become certified in doing the service in that work. And a professional that understands doing that will do a lot better job at the level of restorative cleaning or managed cleaning that has to go up after a catastrophe. Not only
why is that important, though, that this type of restorative cleaning to these standards be done? I mean, is it to try to ameliorate concerns, for instance, toxicity of dust and ash, or
yeah, I mean, you definitely are going to watch where the spread was based on proximity of the fire and the damage and the materials that likely moved from the worst spots to the outlying areas where there may have been structures that have soot and noticeable ash that could be considered contamination affecting the health of the indoor environment, depending on what the contents of that ash is sampled as, whether it's just being sampled by an industrial hygienist to have just ash particulate, or is it having asbestos residue? Is it having other hazardous regulated materials in any community that then could become friable, breathable in its cleaning process, or removal affecting the indoor occupant? So managed cleaning is, for the protection of the indoor occupant. Many structures in the nearby areas of these sorts of larger, yours was urban wildfire, the growth, everything that happens. And you look at the Marshall Fire, we had lots of wildfire that led to huge urban involvement. So the level of contamination difference between the fields versus the homes and the older homes.
That to me was the striking similarity between.
And that happened widely when you look at cabin structures, just not as many structures and more wildfire woodlands that happened in the East Troublesome Fire up in near Rocky Mountain National Park in our mountain line, in our mountain towns.
Shawn, this is Tom Blackburn Rodriguez. I had a question, if I might. In the Marshall fires, how important was communication with the community, and how that's compared to Lahaina? In order for you to do your work of restoration, people have to trust you. So how important is communication with the community?
Well, it was huge for me. As a local community member that was already integrated as a cleaning company, we were already trusted within our community through many of the moms groups and the social media reach between the 40,000 folks that live in these 10,000 structures or homes that are still standing. I immediately personally was able to contact and deal with our community leaders, our mayoral contacts in the community of Superior, Colorado, and which is a subset of Louisville zip code. And they were immediately communicating with the mayors in Boulder and the congressmen and the state of Colorado officials that were immediately making sure that the movement of funds for the cleanup that was necessary was being organized in a smart way. And this local community level to the people communication was it was huge, and it's huge in why we recovered quickly. They expected it to take well over a year to get the cleanup done.
Communication is occurring right during the.
It happened immediately, and the people were reached out to. We had a good infrastructure and a good communication between each level, local municipality, the state levels, the county levels, that things were understood, what standards would be set for the cleanup needs, the process that would be invaded, the vetting of the contractor that would be awarded, the environmental level cleanup that needed to be done for all the sites that were burned. All of this happened, very, very systematically and because there was open communication quickly within all those different subsets of the market.
And
as restorers locally, the contractor, we were, I was local already, so I got the opportunity to work with the people that came in from out of our neighborhood that were fixing our neighborhood, that we needed the large national contractors to come in and do the smoke damage cleanup and within the pockets of all these homes that were, semi-structures that people were sorting around and starting to hoard through or not, as they were communities that were regulated by the police for months. You couldn't even go in to dig in through the structures, which people wanted to suit up with Tyvek suits and respirators and start sorting through for their personal things that might have been salvaged from it. And it was, risk of body and health to do that. So the communication to knowing it was healthy to be in the environment, working with what restorers would come in, the community get things done, to create the coordinated cleanup efforts with FEMA's funding to have it happen, that we did in 4 months instead of a year, happened because of good communication.
What would you say should be the communication process then in a town like Lahaina? Do you have any recommendations on communications that should occur in Lahaina?
Well, as far as making sure the money's moving and to support the community, it comes obviously through Congress, but, making sure that the statehood representation over the emergency disaster coordination has been assigned to a person that has the authority to regulate where those funds start to flow to for the contractor that's primarily being chosen, that understands the regulations, the environmental impact, the dust impact, the environmental things that happen during the cleanup, not just from what happened from the fire and the smoke, that they're going to get that cleaned up and knows how to do it. I mean, obviously it's complicated with marine controls and going to the ocean and having these materials removed to an area and then have to be going someplace else is different than a lot of ours inland work.
You guys have some strategic advantages. You have an interstate freeway system. You have rail lines. You have rocky flats, I think, or
yeah. I mean, and I live right next to that rocky
there.
flats. We worry about the drainage and the moisture through that and the toxins that can move into our water systems or other environmental impacts of some of those. Where already there was plutoniums or all the different things that came from the metals.
So even the so-called regulated hazardous sites are not. So that should be a warning to say the county if they're trying to explore putting a hazardous dump like in an area.
Warning to make sure who you vet is your contractor that's coming in is actually going to do it and not cut corners in the process of lining their dumpsters, getting it controlled and covered in the removal process. Those things in the cleanup steps often can get done quickly by doing them at night or when people aren't really watching what goes into the air and then knowing what happens. So I would just, it's going to slow down because it is ultimately regulated or, with all the different things that could have happened in those communities by where it's going to go at the end of it. And then how clean do you want it to be before you say it's okay to go rebuild on that site? To what level? And you got to set a standard, which happened in the Department of Health. And then the environmental samplers would come in and clear the site of the soils for the indicated metals or materials that you set as your process of what you're going to indicate need to be not there before you clear it. And that started and then diminished even in the Boulder community, in the Boulder County Department of Health, between the state and the local municipalities then to regulate what they were doing, and the contractor would follow those rules for the cleanup. There were independents that got hired to do some of the cleanup in the midst of that. They definitely, they got tested at the end of it. Most sites passed, some didn't, and they had to go in and re-scrape them. And when they didn't pass, then they were really being watched of how well they kept the soils wet and covered them and removed them to prevent dusting from going into the very nearby homes that were still standing that had already been through full remediation work, which means controlled cleaning,
that's the thing.
Walls, maybe painting.
Senator, you've been concerned about toxic dust as well, haven't you?
The cough wasn't to emphasize that, but yes, no, of course, and to the very things that that Shawn has pointed out, and he touched upon the use of independent contractors who could kick up more of this if tested and shown. Again, to his point, you do the analysis, front analysis. It shows that if it's getting kicked up, you remediate and you clean to industry standards in a house, and then they come in and kick it up again, and then this is going on potentially all over the place. But I really want to emphasize his point about the contracts and the contractors and their being publicly known and the terms of it and what's going to happen and who's going to do it, because that's been a huge thing in this one. For us, it's been completely missing. Whether it's
trust.
A temporary
you're
school.
You're going to have to let somebody in your community that's doing a lot of the cleanup to make it healthy for who's going to be there when they're gone. That contractor's got to be vetted to do the right thing and to be able to follow it. And the level of cleanup that's done there has got to make it healthy for the world to come back to and feel comfortable they can come back to, and the community to live there to know that they've got their heritage back and their space. It stays open for 2 years. So I wanted to speak to that. A lot of these claims that happen in the homes or the environments, not just for the rebuild time that's necessary in fire, but also for the emotional, the local, the re-cleaning for emotional cleans, as I often call them, or just for the subjective need of cleaning actual toxins, and it's standard to if there's still dioxins or nude things that are in the environment after the cleaning has happened. Many homes get cleaned again. The ducts and ventilation get cleaned again. The service of the professional cleaner is still called for because the claim stays open often for bring an industrial hygienist, and if it's not to the standard your insurance said you felt was a clean enough environment for your home based on your subjective needs, that it is at the level that it was before the contamination, you'll get it recleaned or replaced at times. And some folks found dioxins in their walls later, or ash residue that was never uncovered because it made it through the Tyvek or through the building materials into the structures. They were so windborne that they moved in and were getting headaches and sick after they moved in, after the home had been professionally remediated, that then they started digging into walls for the nearby structures that were still standing that people had moved back into. So having good industrial hygienist professionals to validate with science what's going on to some level, and a community that's not rushing back into those to an unhealthy environment that isn't being validated.
Unfortunately, that's exactly what's happening. They're being rushed back in, whether it's the schools opening up right next to the burn zones or people.
The hospital that we have near us, even though it was only smoke damage, was closed down with air scrubbers, vetted cleaning people that were in there for a long time, so the insurance companies felt comfortable with that being a cleaned up environment, and the industrial hygienists that were validating that the homes, the hospitals, and especially places that were dealing with medical concerns further past this in our communities, let alone a small community center or a healthcare center that might not be a full-on hospital for those sorts of procedures. But it's immune compromised. People are in these environments. People get breathing issues from being around it during the exposure. Just like asbestos in any environment, if you're right there and breathing it, you're going to have considered exposure events later. So just
Shawn,
and then thinking it's because of the new dust.
Shawn, did you have any challenges with contractor fraud in the Marshall Fire? What should we be looking for here in Lahaina to avoid contractor fraud?
Restoration work is well-managed cleaning services. And a lot of people hired to get that work professionally done in their home. And some customers did not pay those contractors for doing what they did or didn't do to the customer standard in communication. So I think there's been not only contractor fraud, but insurance fraud that happens in any restoration environment. I was exposed and affected. I get this money. Usually a contractor will write up an estimate and the consumer gets their payout from the insurance company because they're within the exposure area. And then they do or don't actually get the work done to clean. Then they go to try to sell that house later and can't prove they professionally had the work done, the insulation replaced, or it actually remediated. It can affect their ability to resell the actual home. If there's been fraud, especially, and never done work that can be proven, those can affect the resale values of the communities around. The contractors being validated coming in, taking money, upfront money. I need to be paid in percentages or things before that maybe are not willing to work with the insurance company. Ultimately, here's the thing. The restoration contractor is working for the homeowner, not hopefully the insurance company. They're looking to solve the problems for their client, who is likely the property owner of when they're cleaning or building or remodeling and fixing it. The contractor that works for the insurance company, is going to be limited by the communication through them. I try to work for the homeowner and have the homeowner make sure they get done what they want and see if there are policies aligned to getting them covered for those things and working with the homeowner and their insurance, but not making the homeowner step away and out of the relationship. Is you see it, the homeowners that get pushed out by the insurance, bigger restoration guys, the big companies, national disaster teams that don't know what they're doing or do know what they're doing, and they're getting all the money up front, saying they're coming in and cleaning it, HEPA vacuuming, running equipment, thermal fogging, running ozone, doing all the prescriptive things we would do in a fire or smoke loss, and then they do, or maybe they don't do them, but they certainly get paid for it. So making sure the homeowner has control over their money payouts, I think, is a way to help control that fraud.
That's really important advice for people listening out there who are going, obviously, into this phase. One of the things that with the phase two, of course the debris removal is, and then in phase 3 is going to be bringing in all the supplies and materials and everything. You guys were able out there to be able to get that kind of, because you were able to use the interstate system in other states to bring in all of these different types of experts and equipment and materials and things like that. Do you think for us, given we only have like an island chain in the ocean with a small harbor, that
I hope the tankers and I hope the barges are already loaded up and making their way in, because it's going to take forever to get the materials and to maintain the cost of the acquisition and to build them to a new standard of build versus maybe the old fishing town style builds that happened over a period of time to building but back to what it was or wasn't insured for by the owner versus the tenant of the use of that space, and will they rebuild to use it in the way that it was before, or something different out of design of what the community's historic look was or development was. It's going to be expensive. Lumber in 2020 and all that, the shortage of 21 cost a building material cost that it's stabilized now, at least in our ability to have rail and truck and get things quickly to us and supply around in 48. But man, I can't fathom the timeline it's going to extend, the cost of materials, and then the building contractors that are good at their craft that you then trust to rebuild the things that need to be done. It's not your local builder also necessarily, because they're already overwhelmed with all the projects they want for the next 10 years probably if they did it. So it's going to be labor.
See, and these are all important things that, and I want to emphasize that the barge should be loaded already. And yet none of that is, at least as far as the world knows, and the community knows, is happening. So this is the kind of thing where, to me, it was an eye-opening connection being made with you and others. And I want to thank you, Shawn, also for connecting me to even more people out there who were involved with this, because in my mind, it's like we should be eagerly trying to reach out to yourself and others who've gone through similar things to see, okay, this is where you guys were at, this is how you did it, and we should be doing it like this. And, well, we didn't do it like that, but going forward, we should be doing it like that even more.
You have contractors that are right now not as busy as they normally are on the lower southern coasts of Louisiana and Florida, where they normally are doing hurricane work this time of year. Just as a point of their business approach, they're looking at Hawaii as where can we go help there, since we didn't get as busy as our resources get stretched here now, but they don't know how to get into your communities from a mid-size to a larger national restoration company, and their main work is to clean up what's cleanable still. The movement of the soils and what you have is the catastrophe. Major areas are about builders, and getting then the politics aligned for the permits to be released so people can come home. We rebuilt at twice the national average in Marshall Fire already. A third of the homes in some of the larger communities have already got occupancy already. It's because our resources are so thick here, and we were many were well insured, many were not. But the level of insurance to cover the actual costs of the new construction costs are way out of whack for many families that will just have to take what they get for the lot once it settles out. Literally when the dust settles.
Yes, and you see many of those represented in those tracts of land that are just empty. But this is a thing that it's obviously front and center in Maui. All the things you laid out in Lahaina, which the end result is that they may just go ahead and have to take the insurance money and turn around and sell the land.
Well, for our Hawaiian friends to know, as a restoration industry representative that speaks to many and for many of us, we are here to help, and we just need to know we have the place to go to stay where and what you need the help with once the standards of the community and the government have been set to what can be done. The biggest thing then is the environmental cleanup, the earth movers. Get the tractors in and start clearing it out in a responsible way, in a controlled dust fashion so the toxins don't respread during the cleanup, and then having a controlled plan, coordinated plan on a government national level where that money then helps get those materials to a place that it can be, and then the rebuild can start to come in and lumber can move in and people can have plans for their community to be rebuilt.
Senator, we're just about
January.
Shawn, Senator, we're just about wrapping up in about 2 minutes on this segment. Have we had a chance to touch on what testing needs to be done, Shawn? Can you?
I would tell you, you're testing for metals. You're testing for heavy metals, hazardous materials. You're looking for asbestos. You're looking for the movement, and they're usually going to be close by. They're heavy. They fall out of the air quickly, and depending on the wind that was blowing, that was moving, and you look at proximity rings around where the contaminant zones were to how far out you got to test. But that's probably the best calibration of what you can test, and then that it's clean and dry to a hospitable standard before you rebuild.
All right, so it has to be really done well. It has to be done very
well.
well.
And vetted by an industrial hygienist that tests then set what they're testing for, what metals, what materials. Boulder County had a list that got revised and then accredited to what that industrial hygienist would come in and do with. If you're needing contact with environmental people that did the testing, I know many, at least one that I was very close with, that did a lot of the sites, I think 50 plus for clearance to what he tested them for. But watching over the process when it's being cleaned up is also got to be done too, because I think part of what happened here for the speed of the process was things may have happened quickly because we didn't have the regulatory oversight in the watching of it, the policing of some of it. Might have moved things faster in our environment than should have.
Exactly.
You won't have
and
that
that's
freedom.
something the
There's
Department
too many
of
eyes
Health
everywhere
here,
around you.
And the director, I've already been talking to him about, and he shares those concerns, to your point right there. And, and all of this has to be done with the proper controls and oversight and monitoring. And I guess what really throws a wild card is the county is allowing people to use their own individual contractors, which, of course, then adds a whole new level of potential activity and chaos, if you will, to the situation. And you have people who have
there are
home.
industrial hygienists, environmental specialists here that can help you, that did it work here, that would be good to align with. If you need their names or numbers, you've got my contact information.
Well, I'll
if you
definitely
need
reach out on my
pros,
end, and I'm hoping that if the county people are listening to this show and others, that they will also do the same and take advantage of your resources and others, because right now the more connections, the more resources, the more expert knowledge of people who've been through similar situations can only help us. And I, for one, thank you, Shawn, for everything that you have shared with me, because it's been very enlightening and especially very poignant given the stage we're at with the contracts and the impending phase 2.
If your community needs further just social help, quick meetings, discussions on what they can do to make sure to self-checking their home, should I or think about cleaning up or having a restoration contractor professional come in, feel free to reach out.
Will do. And thank you so much for sharing your expertise on. Thank you for your helping us network with even more resources on levels from others who have gone through this, and hopefully we can chart a way forward more clear given your experience and all the help that's available to us potentially. Mahalo again, Shawn, for everything.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
Have
Shawn.
a great day.
Thank you for calling in all the way from Colorado. A lot of great information. And, Senator, I'm sure if people did want to follow up, they can always contact your office for more detailed information.
Yes, and I think a lot of the things he brought up for both the individual and the community and even government are super poignant. And it's the things that I've been saying, especially since I've went ahead and made those connections. I've been coming out and saying the things that Mr. Basaillion, sorry, not very good at French, touched upon in his interview. And these are all things that, and it's alarming in my mind that given the description and then given where we're at, how non sequitur there are. But, hopefully this will be something that, government entities will look at, the community will demand, hey, use these resources, use these people. Why aren't these things being done as was done out there? Look how much faster they move because they did them. How much slower are we going to move because we're not doing them? And then how much money is going to be wasted in time lost?
Well, I think I know that you will want to stay on this in the show, and we'll continue to follow up on this subject and look at health concerns and connections to other experts and reaching out to other states as well that have had this problem and what can we learn from their experience.
Exactly, like white on rice.
Now, Senator, there's a convention going on here in Maui, the CNHA convention.
Yes, the CNHA convention is kicking off, and it's really an exciting thing. The Native Hawaiian groups are all coming out for the convention, and it's going to help to really help with the visitor industry. It's going to help to bring a lot of exciting, innovative people and leaders to Maui to have discussions and panels and breakouts. And it really also to put the Native Hawaiian community on center stage is part of a visitor effort. It's also a good thing because, we want to see culturally sensitive regenerative tourism and tourism like this, where you have business component, a group component in there. It's a good thing. So I'm very happy that they're coming out there. And I know there's going to be a lot of good speakers, and the panels themselves would be very exciting.
Well, my understanding is 1,800 people have registered for this conference. It's just really the place to be for the next couple of days. I read about one of the panels are talking about being able to create land trusts in order to preserve the housing, and also to look at how they might be able to reconfigure what they want to do in Lahaina, but do it in a land trust.
I've been singing that song for several weeks too, and I'm very happy that's going to be a key component because, as Shawn and I discussed recently, and it's been everything's connected in a disaster. There are going to be a lot of people because of underinsurance, lot line, and other issues that he described and more that aren't going to be able to build, and they're just going to sell. And you're going to have all sorts of parcels of land ending up in a speculation free-for-all. Or a community trust land bank can step in and provide the corpus to secure these things. And because you don't have a dividend-driven bottom line, but a public good bottom line, you can make more holistic decisions in being able to create more socioeconomic opportunity and realign for better design for everybody, more of a community feel instead of a hodgepodge. And so that's why I'm really happy that they're going to take that up. And I'm happy that, there's some serious discussion going into it because it will hopefully avert what could turn into a gold rush. But instead of gold, it's Lahaina land. That's
right.
The rush.
I think your position has always been to keep the people on the land that they were on, often for generations of families, rather than being pushed out or having to sell because of the economic realities.
You lose the people, you lose the character of Lahaina. What comes back isn't Lahaina, it's a plastic caricature.
Well, amen to that, Senator. I think everyone listening will agree with you on that position. We do not want to create a little plastic village out there just for the tourists.
Exactly. That's, I guess, my red line, if you will, or lion. Shawn would get that joke.
No. What's going on with
it's a Colorado joke?
What's going on with the Real Estate Commission?
Real Estate Commission is actually doing a thing called Condorama, and normally it would be about as exciting as it sounds, unless you're really into condos. This year actually is very informative because one of the keynote presentations is going to be a look at the Maui wildfires and how that's going to affect the insurance market for condominium owners, AOAOs, and reserves. This is a very timely thing. We had a meeting on it with our Consumer Protection Committee and our chair, Senator Keiko Hole, about this very same issue. And so this is going to be, I think this is going to be one of the more insightful. There's all sorts of things that happen at these things, from condo education, from board member education, from how to deal with national problems affecting condominiums. Of course, many people listening in South and West Maui live in the condominium regime. However, I think the most important, and they're dedicating a good chunk of it in the beginning, is going to be the effect of the Maui wildfires on the insurance and reserves. So I recommend everybody who is either on a board of condominium or an owner should try to join, at least tune into that first segment, because that, I think, will be very informative. Those are the drum beats that are coming on the horizon. And so this information will be very helpful for people to kind of get ahead insofar as what is coming and how they can prepare.
Well, I know a couple of things they're going to be addressing are insurance rates and whether or not the condos are underinsured given
that's
current
what
circumstances.
I was just saying. That's the segment of the Maui wildfires.
Yeah,
of Condorama is about underinsurance, which we've discussed with Shawn and others, but of course reserves and other types of things related to the effects on the industry of the Maui wildfires.
Well, a lot's been going on nationally, Senator. Do you have any thoughts on the Congress passing again a continuing resolution to keep the government open?
Oh, we actually threw that in the script for you. That's your thing. We figured you were going to mention it anyway, so we might as well get ahead of it.
I have to tell you, I will. Truth in Advertising. I was watching it on C-SPAN yesterday. It took 5 minutes in order to move it from the floor because they didn't go through committee. They just brought it right to the floor and voted on it. The interesting thing about it, and your listeners may be interested as well, it took more Democratic votes than Republican votes to pass it, and the number of Republicans who voted against it was larger than the number of votes that kicked out the former speaker. So it's a really convoluted situation, and the only thing was missing was they weren't serving hot dogs. That's
no, it's like sounds like one of those dysfunctional Thanksgiving dinners you hear about. I mean, it's just I mean, through all that dysfunctionality, though, they got it through, and that's obviously important for us, given that any kind of federal government shutdown could cause chaos.
FEMA money, that kind of thing, yeah.
Well, FEMA's pre-funded,
Yeah.
but it's other things, and but also too the bigger safety net issues.
Senator, we've got
and then,
about
of course, we have federal workers.
we have about 2 minutes left. Do you want to tell people how they can contact you with questions or concerns?
Yes, you can. I sure will. Actually, you can contact me at Sen McKelvey, SENMCKELVEY, one word, lowercase, at capital TOL.Hawaii, spelled out lowercase.gov. We can also be reached on our phone with my amazing staff who can try to help you with your problems or your concerns, disaster related or not. Even if you're not in our district, we'll see if we can give a hand. 808-586-6070. Keep up with us on everything that's going on every phase 2 and everything else on our Facebook and Instagram page. That's at Sen McKelvey for both handles.
Thank you, Senator, and be sure to tune in to Capital Connection every Wednesday at 7 a.m. right here on KOI 1110 a.m. and affiliated FM stations. Aloha.